Coming up tonight at 7:30, it's Burke's Backyard with handy tips for around your garden and home. Then at 8:30, it's comedy with your Friday night movie, Her Alibi, starring Tom Selleck and Paula Poritskova. An horrific car accident claims 2 lives in Hobart. And the tragedy in Rwanda worsens as cholera spreads through border camps. Good evening, I'm Tom Payne. A 23-year-old woman and a 3-year-old girl, both from Rosetta, were burnt to death in an horrific accident on Mary's Hope Road in Hobart's northern suburbs last night. A Tarago van had overturned after trying to avoid a wallaby. A woman who went to help was killed along with a child after a second vehicle hit the van.
Early today, just a handful of police were trying to put together the puzzle of last night's tragedy. It started with a minor accident and someone coming to help. This Tarago van had rolled on its side after swerving to miss a wallaby. A 23-year-old woman living in flats nearby ran down to help. While her husband called the ambulance, the 36-year-old parents who were still in the van passed her their child.
We're not quite sure how long after, whether it was a minute or a couple of minutes afterwards, but the other vehicle came down the hill and skidded into the undercarriage of the Tarago. The
36-year-old driver and his 9-year-old daughter were uninjured, but on impact, petrol splashed over the rescuer and the infant.
There was obvious damage to the fuel tank and the connecting hoses, so we believe that sparks or electrical connections would have ignited the fuel once that was spilt out.
The parents of the child were only metres away when the woman and the 3-year-old were engulfed in flames.
I believe the child died instantly and the adult female died shortly after, I believe.
Both were severely burnt. Rex Clements was also helping at the scene. He returned today, still in shock. Neighbours say it was a terrible night.
I was a bit numb, sort of. Yes, and to see all that, to see the bodies on my flowers up the top is terrible.
The parents sustained minor injuries. People who attended the accident are urged to contact Hobart Police for counselling.
On the border between Rwanda and Zaire, the plight of 1 million homeless people is turning from tragedy to a disaster of epic proportions as cholera sweeps through the refugee camps. The disease strikes with frightening speed, hundreds of Rwandans dying by the hour as they flee the terrors of their own country. The mass of people now stretches from horizon to horizon. Our report tonight from Britain's ITN is heart-wrenching, but must be shown to a world just coming to grips with the crisis.
There can be no place in this world more bleak, no people more desperate. They are dying in large numbers, in front of us, of cholera. And there are thousands more strewn over this volcanic rock, waiting for the end. One man, Irishman Kevin Noon, is fighting a lone, heartbreaking battle to dispose of the diseased corpses.
Come on! Would you get to work? There are on the bus, there are people dead. Would you get them off it?
All around him is a terrible fatalism. No one wants to touch the victims of cholera. Some of those declared dead, he found still alive.
Carry this man over to the hospital. He's not dead. Hurry! Look at this. There's a handful of people trying to cope with 1 million refugees. Impossible. As you can see, as quick as we take a break, the bodies pile up again. But I have to, if I don't. It's just damn difficult.
But this remarkable man fought back his tears and returned to work on the truck disposing of the cholera victims. All along the road out of Goma, there are children sitting beside their dead mothers, confused and with no one to care for them. Others wander amid the crowds, lost and abandoned. So moved by their plight, aid agencies are rescuing some, carrying them to a local orphanage. The 1 million refugees living rough, surrounded by the dying and the diseased, are now stripping the forests for fuel, leaving a desolate environment even less able to sustain such large numbers of people. The scenes here this evening, so harrowing before, have now become almost unbearable. The cholera is spreading at a quite frightening rate, and this camp has been turned into a giant cemetery. The only hope today, a fragile one, is that a few of the Hutu refugees did step over the border, back into Rwanda, heading home. But the vast majority remain in quite desperate conditions, conditions that are getting worse by the hour.
A strong showing by the real estate sector has seen the state government's 93-94 budget come in $1.2 million better than target. While stamp duties were high, revenue from payroll tax and mineral royalties were below budget estimates.
The government had estimated the 93-94 budget would come in at just under $53.5 million. But through unexpected revenue, the government has ended the financial year with a surplus of $1.2 million. The buoyant real estate market provided the government with its biggest saving, with stamp duties on sales coming in $13.5 million higher than expected. Other revenue earners for the government included casino tax and licence fees, which came in $2.4 million higher, and business franchise fees on tobacco, which added $5.2 million. Both payroll tax recoveries and mineral royalties were down on government estimates. The second surplus Liberal budget may lead to an upgrading of Tasmania's credit rating, according to Mr Rundle.
I would hope that a few years down the track that we will have an upgrading, and that of course will result in lower interest payments for Tasmania on our state debt.
It may also spell good news for the August budget, which Mr Rundle says will provide support for core agencies such as health, education and police services, as well as providing support for the tourist industry. Mr Rundle says he expects investment to grow in Tasmania, with investors beginning to show confidence in the state and its economy.
I will be very surprised if in the next few months there aren't some announcements in the state that will indicate that investor confidence in our island is improving.
Labor leader Michael Field says the government must confront unemployment and housing in its budget, and has urged his opponents to combat the state's crime problem.
The federal government is in turmoil following reports that key ALP figures want to see Carmen Lawrence replace Brian Howe as Deputy Prime Minister. Mr Howe denies any move against him, but the left wing is furious at the attempts to embarrass their senior spokesman.
Brian Howe believes the campaign against him is designed to destabilise his left-wing faction's opposition to privatisation of virtually all government business enterprises.
I'm not going to be silenced. I'm going to go to that national conference and I'm going to debate the issues as I see it at that particular time.
The ALP conference in September is heading for a furious debate over privatisation. The left is especially concerned about plans to sell off all airports along with Qantas and, it fears, parts of telecom. In recent weeks, Mr Howe has spoken out against wholesale sell-offs. He says it's essential the government retain ownership of key public instruments like the airports. He suspects Labor's right wing is promoting Health Minister Carmen Lawrence for his job as a warning to back off. Other members of the left have been quick to support Mr Howe.
I have heard no member of the Labor Party argue that there should be a change.
And reports that ALP National Secretary Gary Gray has rebuked the Deputy Prime Minister for not supporting the official line on privatisation has also touched off outrage.
Certainly, Gary would have been acting off his own initiative. There was no authority from the National Executive.
Carmen Lawrence has nothing to say on the claims that she's being groomed to take on the Deputy Prime Ministership. But neither issue is going to go away. Both privatisation and the future of Brian Howe remain hot topics within the ALP.
An armed robber escaped with cash from the Newnham Rolf Voss supermarket in Launceston last night after assaulting a staff member. The assistant manager was hit over the head with a metal pipe and then forced to lie on the floor while the offender, dressed in a balaclava, stole money from the safe. The man escaped on foot. Police are continuing their investigations. In the news ahead, the US Carl Vinson gives Tasmania a spectacular farewell.
On on a current affair.
You're never too old.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Inspirational Aussies.
They often call me a supergram.
They show us how to keep fit, busy and happy as we age.
What about boyfriends?
Dozens.
7 o'clock tonight.
Take KFC's Ultimate Value Challenge. How much would you expect to pay for this family meal? Now at KFC, you'll only pay $14.95 for 8 pieces of chicken, 2 large chips, a large potato and gravy, plus 2 double-serve salads and 4 rolls. $14.95. That's right, KFC's family variety meal, now only $14.95. So much food, so little money. But then only KFC can promise you better family value or your money back.
Judy, my dogs work long and hard, so they need a hard-working food.
Pal Meaty Bites Working Dog Formula has the higher concentrated energy working dogs need to work harder all day and 5-way nourishment to keep them in top working condition every day.
Well, just look at them. It's the end of the day and they're still full of energy. They do better on it. They work better on it. Why would I feed anything else?
Top breeders recommend Pal Meaty Bites Working Dog Formula.
Now available on video, The Great Little Train from Down Under. From the popular Tas TV Our World series, now you can enjoy a special 90-minute production of this unique documentary. From Tasmania's rugged west coast to the tranquil beauty of the English countryside, follow the fascinating journey of the Tasmanian Garratt locomotive as you explore 3 of the world's small railways. The Great Little Train from Down Under, now available on video for only $39.95 at all Loughran stores.
KFC's Big New.
Double fillet crunch burger.
Down to 1 buy 2. Juicy chicken fillets plus lettuce and mayo.
Double fillet crunch burger.
New from KFC. I like it like that.
As many as 1 in 5 Tasmanians care for a sick relative or friend. Today, their needs were examined as part of a national campaign to understand their work.
1.5 million Australians are carers, 72% of them women. The Carers Association is consulting its members throughout the country as a first step to alerting policymakers to their needs.
Trying to recommend to Canberra, if you like, what policy and program changes ordinary people in Tasmania need.
Many are on low incomes, often 2/3 of their pay spent in the caring role. They suffer psychological problems and depression. Sharon Moore says at every meeting so far, carers have displayed signs of intolerable stress.
We have stories which are almost like days of our lives in terms of their horrific sort of dimensions.
Jenny Burden has one such story. She cared for her first daughter until she died 5 years ago and now looks after her younger daughter 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
It makes life very difficult sometimes, especially when you ache so much that it's difficult to turn over in bed and you have to get up and attend to someone else's needs.
Like other carers, the stress has worsened her own health problems, but she says there are simple things the community could do to ease her plight.
Far more access into chemist shops, access to tech. For Trace to be able to go to tech, she would need an assistant. The toilets also need to be on the right floor.
The Department of Human Services and Health is funding the nationwide meetings. The results will be released in October and incorporated in the federal government's agenda for families.
A 10-year-old schoolgirl is in a serious condition in the Royal Hobart Hospital after being hit by a car while crossing Newtown Road. The car was travelling towards the city when it hit the girl near Roop Street in Newtown. Faulty electric blankets were the cause of 2 separate house fires in the north of the state overnight. An East Launceston family of 5 was taken to hospital with smoke inhalation after fire gutted a bedroom. While at Branksome, a burning mattress was extinguished by volunteer firefighters before it caused any damage to the house.
An electric blanket malfunction on an unoccupied bed started the fire in this Abbott Street house at about 12:30 last night. An 18-month-old child was asleep in the room when the fire started. Parents were only awoken by a smoke detector and were able to get their 3 children out of the house before the fire took a hold. Morris Graham from the Tasmanian Fire Service says people should be aware of the dangers of electric blankets which are not kept in good condition.
In a lot of cases, it's a lack of knowledge of what can happen, and we try to get across to the public in any forum that we can the dangers that are about and the simple measures that can be taken.
Electric blankets can malfunction from normal wear and tear, or if they are turned on while not lying flat, causing overheating. Mr Graham says there is also a lesson to be learnt about the importance of smoke detectors.
So people should fit a smoke detector. This, in fact, is a smoke detector which saved 5 lives last night, and even in that condition was still operating.
Most house fire fatalities happen when people are asleep.
The Hobart City Council and the state government today released guidelines to achieve uniformity into the discharge of industrial wastes. It's hoped they'll be adopted by councils throughout Tasmania and reduce potential damage to the environment.
The guidelines formalise discharge agreements between local government and industry, making it easier for councils to encourage companies to control pollution. Its author says substances like arsenic, mercury and flammable materials can damage sewerage systems and in rare cases cause environmental degradation.
Toxins enter the treatment plants and they can inhibit the microorganisms in, say, trickling filters, for example, and you have actual die-off and killing of microorganisms.
In Hobart, permits and agreements force industry to restrict waste, but other councils lack such controls, and there's still the fear that industries like petrol outlets will discharge pollutants straight into treatment systems.
It's important that we're not adding pollutants to our sewage treatment system that are not going to be picked up or treated in the processing of our sewage and, as a result, ending up being a problem.
The guide also includes recommendations for domestic waste, and by reducing chemicals should make sludge and effluent more appropriate for use in agriculture and on sporting fields.
The United Nations has hinted that Serbs in Bosnia could face even tighter sanctions following the collapse of yet another peace plan. The latest diplomatic failure came as UN troops in Sarajevo were fired on while they tried to erect anti-sniper barricades. The firing lasted about 30 minutes. There were no casualties. Britain's opposition Labour Party has elected a 41-year-old lawyer, Tony Blair, to lead it to the next general election.
I therefore declare that Tony Blair is elected Leader of Labour.
Nicknamed Bambi because of his youthful appearance, Blair was a popular choice to replace John Smith, who died from a heart attack in May. And with his party leading the opinion polls by 20 points, he could become Britain's first Labour Prime Minister in almost 2 decades. The most dramatic pictures yet of a comet fragment hitting Jupiter have been taken in Australia. The latest images are from the National Observatory near Canberra and NASA's Melbourne-based Flying Observatory.
Supernova go off or a star go off.
Not to be outdone, the Hubble Space Telescope recorded the comet's biggest impact, and they're calling it Jupiter's black eye. Bigger than Earth, it's now the most prominent feature on the planet. Back home, and the Tasmanian Convention Bureau is to give 40 business and professional people a first-hand tour of the state's convention facilities. The Bureau says the move is a bid to bring more national and international conventions to Tasmania. This year, the Convention Bureau has booked $16 million worth of convention business for around the state over the next 4 years. Glendew Primary School showed off its greatest asset today, the Super Skipping Team. The skippers, who've just returned from Hobart, are said to be the best in the state.
To become a super-duper skipper, you need to be fit, enthusiastic and dedicated. Oh, and you need a bit of skill too. These children are from Glendew Primary School in the 3rd to the 6th grade, and they tour the state teaching kids from other schools the trick to skipping. And it seems they've mastered it.
All that she wants is another baby. She's gone tomorrow, boy. All that she wants is another baby.
The team got together for the National Heart Foundation's Jump Rope for Heart last year, and they've been skipping ever since.
Good job, kids. Some modest gains on the stock market. The All Ordinary's up 3 points. Our dollar also up a touch. Mark Thomas with sport and TFL finals in northern Tasmania.
Guaranteed, Tom. If any of the 4 northern teams can make the final 5, and South Africa begins an historic test match against England at Lord's.
Says to us that we're back as part of the world community.
Things aren't always what they seem.
You can't see the grime and grease that's been ground into this floor over the years, because earlier today we cleaned part of it with a regular cleaner. It looks clean, but a regular cleaner can't kill germs, viruses and the bacteria that cause colds, flu and infections. This part of the floor we cleaned with new PinoClean all-purpose cleaner, a cleaner and powerful disinfectant all in one. As it cleans, it kills germs and flu viruses and keeps on killing them for 24 hours. So, it's not just clean, it's hygienically clean.
Sizzling bacon, cheese, a freshly cracked egg and 100% beef. The Beef Bacon and Egg Games Burger from McDonald's. But you'd better hurry.
The problem with most food wraps is that they make a simple task difficult. So we've developed new Glad Wrap to make it even easier. A wrap that's easy to handle from start to finish and seals like no other? How would that make you feel? Glad. New Glad Wrap. Easier to use than ever.
To the AFL, and there's been a mixed reaction to the jumpers Fremantle has chosen for its AFL debut next season. While the tag of the Fremantle Dockers has been warmly accepted, some have given the Guernsey the thumbs down.
While every other AFL coach spent today working on last-minute plans for the weekend, Gerard Neesham was a picture of contentment. But then again, he doesn't even have a team yet.
When we're 3 or 4 years down the track, we'll have names that'll be in our jumpers that'll people say, yeah, they're great footballers or they're going to be great footballers, and we didn't know who they were before Fremantle started.
It was only last night we found out the true colours of the AFL's newest club. And I must admit, I think the jumpers look awful. The Dockers will have enough trouble finding top-class players to head west. That jumper will hardly act as an incentive. Club officials decided on the name Dockers as a tribute to those who guided ships into the port of Fremantle. Meanwhile, there's a certain Adelaide player who's in need of guidance. Tony Modra has been suspended by his own club for failing to attend a compulsory training session. The Crows have also imposed a fine on their star full forward. Modra might be one of the most exciting players around, but he should remember an old saying, the game is bigger than the individual.
The TFL will decide on August the 15th whether to include a 12th team, either Scottsdale or Ulverston, in 1995. Last night, the Commission guaranteed a final this season at either Devonport Oval or York Park, but only if a Northwestern or Northern club makes the final 5. The most likely Northern final venue is Devonport, with North and South Launceston both 3 games out of the 5, Devonport 4th and Burnie 6th. The TFL Commission is also concerned about recent tribunal anomalies between its Southern, Northern and Northwestern panels. A centralised tribunal in Hobart in 1995 is almost inevitable.
Having in place adequate procedures which minimise the need for travelling and so on and so forth, and we're currently investigating that process. But generally, I think the feeling is we ought to get away from a Saturday night tribunal hearing, give people time to cool down and collect their thoughts, probably hold it on a Monday or a Tuesday night and try and have one tribunal to come to grips with it.
In round 15, there are 4 matches, all tomorrow. North Launceston and Launceston at York Park, Devonport and South Launceston at Devonport Oval, New Norfolk and Hobart at Boyer, and the match of the day, ladder leader Sandy Bay against 3rd place Glenorchy. Since the TFL's inaugural year in 1986, the Magpies hold an enviable 15-6 record against the Bay, including the 86 premiership and an impressive 46-point victory in round 4 this season. But the Bay has lost only 3 games in 1993.
From our point of view, we have had the ability this year to bounce back from losses, which is a goal we set ourselves to achieve during the year. The other thing is that we've set various goals at different points during the year, and we have achieved most of them. We've had a couple of hiccups, but mostly we've achieved those goals. So that's probably the positive point from our perspective.
South Africa's return from cricket's wilderness became complete today, with Captain Kepler Wessels scoring a century in the first test against England at Lord's. But it wasn't their best day with the bat, the tourists finishing at 6 for 244.
Father Time and a sellout crowd had waited 29 years to welcome South Africa back to the home of cricket. For those in grey flannel, the start of a new innings.
we're back as part of the world community.
Andrew Hudson was caught by a bounding Graham Gooch, once banned for taking part in a rebel tour of the Republic. Sporting boycotts drove Kepler vessels out of Africa to play for Australia. Today, a century for his old country under new colours before being dismissed for 105. Motor racing, and it's time for a second generation in Dick Johnson's family.
You should go at least half the thing out once and just see what happens, then you can fine-tune it from there, you know?
Yeah. Dick's 19-year-old son Stephen makes his debut in Sunday's final round of the Touring Car Championship at Oran Park.
I'm willing to learn and slowly learn and try and to be able to drive as good as some of these top drivers one day.
And the muscle cars seem to suit him. Today he held his own with the very best.
Jim Richards is 10th fastest and Stephen's 11th fastest, and there's only 3/10 difference in the times.
But what of the day when young Steve tries to overtake his mentor, Dad, and paymaster?
When that day comes, I suppose I'll have the widest falcon in the business.
And that's sport for a Friday night, Tom.
Thank you, Mark. Wendy with the weekend weather after the break.
The 1995 Yellow Pages is closing for advertising now. This is your last chance to be in it. So call this number before it's too late.
What do you say to a delicious peppered beef and mushroom pratey that includes your favourite flavoured full milk pratey shake, and all for just $4.95? What do you say?
Yes, please!
Hey, wow. Struth, the compost heap.
I've been using Sard for years.
Oh, please, not the pig swill.
Sard's good for any kind of stain.
Oh, no, oil.
I'd probably use the spray on that.
Oh, way to go.
Oh. Sard on his own.
Sard, the best advice you can give anyone.
On Burke's Backyard, down-to-earth gardening with magnolias and spectacular tropical rhododendrons.
Many of them have exquisite perfume.
And at home with world hypnotist Martin St. James.
That's extraordinary.
Burke's Backyard, 7:30 tonight on Taz TV.
This weather report is brought to you by Trust Bank, your bank.
Good evening. The lowest overnight temperature was -4 at Tarraleah, with today's highs 12 at St Helens and King Island. The barometric pressure at the Bureau at 5 o'clock was 1,032 and rising. Looking around the state today, Devonport 0 to 10, Launceston 0 to 11, 4 to 9 for Hobart, Queenstown 1 to 10, Orford 4 to 8, Wynyard -1 to 11, with no significant rainfall in the 6 hours to 3 p.m. The satellite picture shows mottled cloud about southern parts of the state, while the north remains mostly cloud-free. The satellite sequence shows an area of cold, unstable air south of us moving towards New Zealand, with a cloud band to the west, a weakening front. Tomorrow's chart shows an extensive area of high pressure dominating our weather. Tomorrow should see widespread early frosts, followed by a generally fine cold to cool day with light winds. For the coastal waters forecast, southerly winds 5 to 15 knots, becoming variable at 5 to 10 in most waters, locally northwesterly at 10 to 15 in the west. For the southwest and central plateau lakes forecast, variable winds below 5 knots. A road weather alert warns of frost and ice on roads overnight and tomorrow morning. Frosts then fine for the major population centres, Burnie and Devonport 0 to 11, Queenstown a top of 10, 11 for both Swansea and St Helens, Launceston -2 to 10, and for Hobart 1 to 10. For the capitals finally, Melbourne fine and 14, Sydney a few showers and 15, and for Adelaide fine and 18. The outlook for Sunday, a fine and cool day, and for Monday, cool with scattered showers. Just a reminder of the road weather alert. Have a lovely weekend, and thanks, Tom.
Thank you.